You're tuned in to the SANS Science Experience, your gateway to the latest and most compelling research papers and preprints. If you like what we do, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps support the SANS Science Experience. Now, today we're doing a deep dive into something pretty fascinating, something that sounds almost like science fiction. For years, we've kind of known there's some connection between nerves and how aggressive cancer gets, especially its ability to spread, to metastasize. But how? Today, we're looking at research that uncovers a really direct, almost intimate link.
That's exactly right. You know, clinicians have observed for a while that tumors with more nerves, well, they often mean worse outcomes for patients, more metastasis. But the mechanism, the how behind that observation has been pretty murky. The study we're discussing, it really starts to shed some light on that.
Okay, so we know nerves being present is generally bad news in a tumor, but what's the big reveal here? What's the mechanism they uncovered?
Well, the core finding is kind of mind-blowing. It turns out neurons near the cancer cells aren't just, sending signals. Mm-hmm. They're actually giving their mitochondria directly to the cancer cells.
Wait, giving their mitochondria the actual powerhouses of the cell?
Exactly, the powerhouses. Yeah. And this is huge because it gives the cancer cells enhanced metabolic flexibility. Mm-hmm. So a way they can adapt and get stronger, not just by changing things inside themselves, what we call cell autonomous changes.
Right.
This is non-cell autonomous. They're literally importing energy factories from their neighbors, the neurons. It's a direct resource transfer.
Oh, that is genuinely surprising. How on earth did the researchers even figure this out? Tracking tiny mitochondria moving between cells sounds incredibly difficult.
It is. They had to develop a pretty clever tool. It's called MitoTRACER. Basically, it's a genetic reporter system.
MitoTRACER, okay.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So it labels the mitochondria in the donor cells, the neurons in this case, with one color. Then, if a cancer cell takes up one of these labeled mitochondria, the reporter system inside the cancer cell gets activated and permanently switches the cell's color, say, from red to green.
Ah, so any cell that turns green, it received mitochondria from a neuron, and its descendants stay green too.
Precisely. It lets you trace the lineage, and they validated this very clearly. They used cancer cells called Rho-zero cells.
Rho-zero?
Yeah, these are cells they engineered to completely lack their own mitochondrial DNA, so they can't perform normal energy production like oxidative phosphorylation. They basically can't grow well.
Okay, got it.
But when these Rho-zero cells acquired mitochondria from neurons, tracked by MitoTRACER, they were rescued. They regained oxidative phosphorylation, started producing energy efficiently again, and could proliferate. It was clear proof the transferred mitochondria were fully functional.
Wow. So the cancer cells get these fully working power plants donated by nerves. What does that actually do for the cancer cell in terms of, being cancerous?
It gives them a massive advantage. A whole suite of advantages, actually.
Like what?
Well, first, enhanced mitochondrial respiration, obviously. So more energy, more ATP, that's fundamental. But also, they found increased stemness, the ability to form new tumors, which they measured using things like mammosphere formation assays.
So they become better at initiating new tumor growth.
Exactly. And there's more. They handle stress better. They showed improved redox balance, meaning they could tolerate oxidative stress, think hydrogen peroxide much better. And perhaps crucially for metastasis, they showed greater resistance to shear stress.
Shear stress, that's the physical force cells experience in the bloodstream when they're trying to spread, right?
That's the one.
Yeah.
It's a major barrier to metastasis. So being tougher against that is a huge plus for a cancer cell trying to colonize a new site.
Yeah.
All these things are hallmarks of really aggressive metastatic cells.
Okay, so this explains how getting neuronal mitochondria helps, but did they see this happening in, actual cancer progression?
Yeah,
in living
models. They did. They used MitoTRACER in mouse models, specifically breast cancer and melanoma models. And the results were quite stark.
What did they show?
They found that the green cells, the ones that had received neuronal mitochondria, were significantly enriched in the metastatic sites, like the lungs and especially the brain, compared to the primary tumor.
So the cells getting the mitochondria were preferentially the ones successfully making it to distant organs and growing there.
That's what the data strongly suggests. It implies this transfer isn't just happening, it's functionally important, maybe even necessary for successful metastasis, particularly to certain sites.
And does this connect to human cancer at all?
It seems to. They looked at human prostate and breast cancer samples. And consistent with the model, they saw increased mitochondrial content in metastatic cells and also in cancer cells located close to nerves within tumors.
And you mentioned brain metastases were particularly enriched with these green cells in the mice. Any thoughts on why the brain specifically?
That's a really interesting point. Neurons, especially brain neurons, have incredibly efficient and robust mitochondria because the brain is so energy demanding. So maybe acquiring those specific mitochondria gives cancer cells an exceptional advantage for surviving and thriving in the unique environment of the brain.
Fascinating. So wrapping this up, the big takeaway seems to be that nerves aren't just bystanders in cancer. They're actively fueling metastasis by donating these essential power packs, these mitochondria.
Absolutely. This nerve-driven metabolic support, this mitochondrial transfer, appears to be a critical factor enabling cancer's metastatic potential. It really adds a whole new layer to how we understand the tumor microenvironment and metastasis.
It really does. It opens up completely new avenues for thinking about treatment, doesn't it?
Indeed, it makes you wonder, could we develop therapies that specifically target this interaction? Could we block this mitochondrial transfer between nerves and cancer cells as a way to prevent or limit metastasis? It's a provocative thought for future research.
A very provocative thought. And a potential new strategy against one of cancer's deadliest aspects. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. We hope this look at the nerve-cancer connection sparked your curiosity. Remember to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. It truly helps us keep bringing you content here at the SANS Science Experience. Thanks for tuning in.